committee. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Do you mind hitting the switch? Thank you very much.
Switches.
Thank you. Committee, we're going to open the hearing on Senate Bill 553. Amelia, will you give us an overview?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill number 553 creates the Kansas Thrift Savings Plan Act. The plan is a defined contribution retirement plan consisting of mandatory employee contribution, employer contribution, rollover, and deferred compensation accounts for new employees hired on and after July 1st of 2024. Section 1 provides that sections 1 through 14 shall be known as the Kansas Thrift Savings Plan Act and shall be effective on and after July 1st of 2024. The plan is mandatory for all employees first employed by a participating employer on and after July 1st of 2024. The act shall not apply to members of KP&F, the retirement system for judges, the KPERS Corrections subgroup, or to any KPERS members first employed before July 1st, 2024, except as specifically provided in the Act, and you can also look at Section 5. Section 2 contains definitions for terms used throughout the Act. Particular relevance is the term first employed, which means an employee who has not been an employee in a covered position of a participating employer prior to July 1st of 2024, and is employed by a participating employer in a covered position on or after July 1st, 2024, or is a former member of KPERS who withdrew contributions before July 1st, 2024, and is again employed by a participating employer, or was an inactive, non-vested member and who is again employed by a participating employer in a covered position on and after July 1st of 2024. Section 3 requires that the KPERS board to establish a separate thrift savings plan and establish accounts for members of the plan. As a component of the plan, the board shall establish a deferred compensation plan in accordance with Section 457 of the Internal Revenue Code. The board may utilize the existing Kansas Public Employees Deferred Compensation Act to implement the deferred compensation plan required by this act. The plan shall also have a Roth contribution option. The board is authorized to enter into contracts with parties for the purpose of implementing and providing essential services for the plan. Contracts entered into under the Act shall be subject to competitive bid requirements. Section 4 provides that the legislature may prospectively change statutory provisions governing the plan and gives the legislature the express right to do so, and the state of Kansas shall not be responsible for any loss incurred by members under the plan. Section 5 allows for an election for active defined benefit plan members on July 1st, 2024 to become a member of the Thrift Savings Plan, subject to approval of the election by the Internal Revenue Service. An election to become a Thrift Savings Plan member terminates membership in the defined benefit plan, and the retirement system shall calculate the actuarial present value of the member's accrued retirement benefit for all credited service prior to July 1st of 2024, and transfer a lump sum equal to such present value to such member's rollover account. If the IRS refuses to grant approval of the election or issues an adverse decision, this section is severable from the remainder of the Act and shall not be implemented. Section 6 requires the KPERS board to accept the rollover of contributions and the income on such contributions from another eligible retirement plan to the member's rollover account to the extent allowed by the Internal Revenue Code. Section 7 provides the vesting schedule for the Thrift Savings Plan. The members' contributions and the income on those contributions are vested from the date the employee becomes a member of the plan. The members' rollover contributions are vested from the date the contributions are credited to the rollover account. The members' deferred compensation contributions and the income on those contributions is vested from the date the employee becomes a member. And the employer contributions are vested when the member has a total of 5 years of participating service in the plan. If the member is not vested with regard to the employer contributions, upon termination of their plan membership, the employer contributions are forfeited. Section 8 establishes the contribution rates for the plan. Members are required to contribute 6% of compensation to the member's mandatory contribution account and are initially required to contribute 1% to their deferred compensation account. The contribution rate for the deferred compensation account shall increase annually by 1% until the member reaches a maximum contribution rate of 10% of compensation. Members are permitted to adjust the amount of deferred compensation contributions, at least annually or more frequently if allowed by the board. All elections shall be in 1% increments, and a member is allowed to stop deferred compensation contributions and resume contributions. The board shall develop an electronic means for making such contribution elections. With respect to employers, employer contributions shall be 4% of compensation, with an additional 0.5% if the member contributes 1% to their deferred compensation account, or an additional 1% if the member contributes 2% or more to their deferred compensation account. Section 9 establishes the investment alternatives for the plan, and you can see a list of the alternatives in the bill and also in the memo. The legislature from time to time may review the investment alternatives established by this section and may change the alternatives and expressly reserves the right to do so. The board shall notify affected plan members of potential changes before any changes become effective. The board shall also establish a default investment option for any member that does not make investment decisions. The board may utilize a hybrid investment fund as the default investment fund. Members may elect the investment funds in which sums of their accounts are to be invested. And the board is required to make available to members an electronic means for investment allocation elections, and elections shall be permitted daily. Section 10 provides procedures for termination of plan membership and payout options. Section 11 governs distributions from the plan. Section 12 provides a plan member's beneficiary shall be determined as provided in the defined benefit plan regulations. Upon filing a written application with the board after the death of a plan member, the beneficiary is entitled to the member's vested account balance. Section 13 states that before termination of service, a member may not receive a refund of any portion of the member's vested account balance. Section 14 allows thrift saving plan members to be eligible for disability benefits provided to KPERS members under KSA 744927. And Section 15 amends KSA 744920, the KPERS employer contribution statute, to provide that for the purposes of establishing covered payroll for contribution rates, the compensation of members of the thrift savings plan shall be included.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions for Amelia? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure this is familiar for basically research, Madam Chair, but this whole concept of going from defined benefit to defined contribution, I guess that my question for legislative research would be, is that did we not look at this about 10 years ago with the Brownback administration? And the second question would be is I think we might have, I don't know. But was there like any sort of work product that may have come out of appropriations or something about this issue? I don't think this is the first time, at least in my tenure here in the legislature, that we've discussed this. I would just like to see if there's any prior work product. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Eddie, would you mind pulling that together and emailing it to the committee?
Sure.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions for Amelia? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have two questions. I think I know the answer to both, but I need someone a little bit brighter than myself to answer the questions. In Section 5, it mentions that current KPERS participants could basically roll over, is the word I'm going to use, to the thrift savings plan. And so they could not participate in both. In other words, if they, for easy figuring, had a $50,000 count that they could withdraw for the whole thing if they were retired, they couldn't roll 25 into the thrift savings and keep 25 in the current KPERS.
Amelia, Do you want to address that, or we can save that for one of the conferees? Okay, thank you.
I have one more question that I will ask of you, Madam Chair, if I may, and this is, you mentioned in Section 14 that thrift savings members would still be eligible for disability benefits. Would they also still be eligible for the $4,000 CAPERS death benefit?
Senator,
You can
we'll
ask.
save that for one of the conferees also, because with the death benefit, they do not get the payout with CAPERS, and that is a big difference between this plan. The money actually goes to beneficiaries, and there is no death payout. But we'll let the conferees address that.
Okay.
Senator.
Well, I'll get my answer another time, meaning later in the day.
Yeah, this is more for bill drafting. Any other questions for Amelia? Thank you, Amelia. Committee will open up with Representative Highland. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I believe you have my testimony, so I will not read it to you, but thank you for the opportunity to appear. I began working on this probably 4 years ago, and in talking to the chair, through the years, we have worked on this and with Mr. Conroy, but as I traveled around the state, I talked to primarily teachers groups, teachers, and asked them about converting over to a thrift savings plan as opposed to the defined benefit. And it was the younger teachers always said, yes, I would love to switch over to a thrift savings plan. The older, the more seasoned teachers said, no, I'll stay with the one I have, and because I'm afraid I'll lose in the transition. But in the middle ground, they were half and half. So some said yes, some said no. So, but the most important reason for changing over to this is for the state's benefit. Eventually, since I've been here, this is my 10th year, we put in $1 billion into the CAPERS plan. And if the bill goes through that we heard over on our side, we're going to put in another $1 billion. And after a while, that's been in a 10-year span, and I'm thinking that period will shrink, especially if we hit a recessionary period and inflation continues. The state at some point will be unable to afford the defined benefit plan. So that's the reason I started this, and thankfully the chair took this over. And I would sure fall in a group that proposes and supports switching over to a thrift savings plan for those folks that want to do it voluntarily, but all new hires would be in the new plan. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here today, Representative. How many other states have a similar plan as this?
I don't have that information, but I believe some of the conferees will.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'll save my other question for them. So,
Okay,
thank you.
Any other questions for Representative Highland? Seeing none, thank you, and thank you for your
you.
work on this. Committee, next is Matthew Eichmann. He's joining us via WebEx. Matthew, are you online? He does not have it. He will be submitting it.
Good morning. Can
Good
everybody
morning,
see and hear me?
Matthew.
Yes, so my name is Matthew Eichmann. I am the National Retirement Practice Leader for an investment firm called Prime Capital Investment Advisors, headquartered in Overland Park. In addition to overseeing our retirement practice and the money management and the employee education aspect of that, I have 18 years as a practicing employee benefits or ERISA attorney. So I have been working on this from a variety of perspectives, including the legal side and understanding any legal implications, the money management or asset management side so that we can understand the implications from an ongoing cost perspective, and then finally the employee education or employee communication aspect so that we can ensure that people indeed understand what they would have if this went into place. And to follow up on the comments from Representative Highland, that those who had an option could have what they wanted to have moving forward. I will be submitting written testimony at a later point in time. Senator Tyson, would you like me to share any additional opening comments? And if so, do you have a particular area you'd like me to focus on?
No, you may proceed with your testimony. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay, thank you. A pension plan asset manager must strike a very delicate balance between risk and reward objectives. And they do that in large part by seeking a diversified portfolio with the idea that diversification will both generate return and cut down on risk. However, when we see a change in the expectations for how the markets will perform, we face the challenge of either increasing the risk level, reducing the return expectation, or a little bit of both. And frankly, as we look very closely at the KPERS pension plan right now, we see that we're facing that both type of scenario as we move into the future. And as a result, this is likely to further increase the burden on an ongoing basis rather than reduce the cost as we look ahead. And any idea to the contrary, we believe, is tied to a fundamentally flawed premise, and that is the notion that over a long period of time moving forward, that the pension plan can hit its stated return objective, which is currently 7.75%. And in fact, that return objective could be called in question as we look backwards, as we look around us today, and as we look ahead. Frankly, the investment management team that has overseen the portfolio management has done a really good job with the pension plan. This is not any commentary around their performance as asset managers. In fact, they've outperformed the benchmark over 1, 3, 5, 10-year periods of time. So it's not about whether it has been managed well. It's about the reality that the marketplace has changed and evolved. And as we look back over the last 5 years, for example, part of the longest bull run, or part of the longest bull market in our nation's history, even there, the portfolio struggled to hit its stated return objective of 7.75% over longer periods of time. And then now we wake up in the morning and we look around us and say, how much risk is there in the marketplace? And where might we go to be able to attain this high return objective, or this high return, without facing a lot of risk? Where do you want your money to be today if you're trying to attain a high return? Do you want it in U.S. stocks? We look around and we see significant challenges and concerns about inflation, where growth stocks in particular have been hit. Do you want it in developed markets equities? We look over to Europe and we see the implications from the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and we say that's a scary place for us to have our money. Do we want it in emerging markets, where those countries that are going to be hit hard by the increase in commodities prices? Do we want to put it into fixed income or bonds? As interest rates go up, the performance of bonds actually goes down. And that's where we can see that the Barclays U.S. Aggregate Bond Index is down 5.5% this year alone. Do we want it in real estate? And we think about the implications of the COVID-19 pandemic and how hard it has become to invest in real estate, particularly knowing which commercial real estate will do well and which will not. So as we look at those periods of time and then we look ahead and we pull in what's called long-term capital market assumptions. So the largest money managers all over the entire world will look at the various market sectors and say to us, as we look ahead, how do we think these various market sectors will perform? We struggle to find any particular market sector where the expectation over the next 10 years is anything north of 6.5% to 7%. What does that mean? It's kind of the equivalent of somebody saying, I want to average 7.75 points a game in my basketball league, but I'm not going to be able to ever score more than 7 in any single game. And in fact, I'm going to have 2 or 3 or 4 in most of those games. It simply becomes unattainable. So as we look ahead and we think about the ongoing cost, it's important for us to look back and say, how has the cost of this program increased over the last 18 to 19 years? And what we can see is that the increase from kind of the 6 to 8% level up to now, where the assessment is north of 13.5%, our expectation is that that burden will only continue to increase and further fall on the shoulders of Kansas taxpayers. Now, I think my final comments, and then I can take any questions. I think that the opening reference, I took a note here, I apologize, from Senator Holland suggesting that this had been looked at 10 years ago. And that's right. And I know there'll be more discussion about that aspect, but I'm looking out 10 to 15 years from now and wondering if that same question will come up. That same question that says, didn't we talk about this 10 to 15 years ago? Why didn't we do it then? And I think the reality of it is that those types of questions will continue to arise. This will continue to be a challenging conversation, but frankly, the cost is going to become simply unsustainable. And as Representative Highland referenced, the continued need to throw $1 billion in and $1 billion here, in addition to what the various employers are contributing, means that this is the right time to take the courageous step to look at a way to really kind of stop the bleeding, if you will, and to try to get this under control.
Thank you, Matthew. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Thanks for being here. I posed this question to Representative Highland. He was not aware, but do you know if any other states have made this change, adopted this plan? And if so,
Yes.
who are they?
I'll pull up a list, actually, as we're in the middle of our conversation here today, so I can be more specific. But I think what we'll find is that there are roughly 5 or 6 that have moved to a defined contribution plan only, and another 6 to 7 that have done something more like this, where there's a combination where some are in a defined benefit and some are in a defined contribution. So I'd say in total, that means we've got roughly 10 to 12 states that have moved in this direction in some way.
Senator Solentrop. Okay. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have 3 questions here. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Does your company, sir, just so I understand, do you guys operate any thrift savings plans for other states?
We do not.
Do you provide employee consulting services for other entities that would operate these plans in other states?
No, we do not.
Okay. So I'll just, my concern with going to a defined contribution plan is that basically I think this is less transparency for our state employees. And quite honestly, I'm concerned about whoever is running these thrift savings plans. There is no accountability. Talk to me how this is a better process for transparency to Kansas employees as far as the way their retirement monies are being invested, please.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think there's 2 distinct elements there. There's how it's being invested, and then them also understanding what they have. And so to more specifically answer your question about the investment component, the bill as drafted right now would include some specific asset categories. And I believe that having those asset categories and/or including the very commonly used retirement vehicles like target date funds, for example, low-cost target date funds that cost somebody, say, 8 basis points, 9 basis points, or 0.08% or 0.09%, which would allow them to see on a daily basis the impact of market performance on their total account. And so I believe that the concerns about transparency are very valid. I also believe that the marketplace around all defined contribution plans has become dramatically more transparent in the next 10 years, or last 10 years. There's still work to be done, but the marketplace has indeed become more transparent. And one of the benefits to that is that participants, employees, workers, know what they have. And when we think about that monthly retirement income number that they have in CAPERS, I wish that Representative Highland had been able to ask these teachers, the older group and the younger group, who understands what your benefit means to you. And I think what we would see is those who have been around, those from an earlier generation, have more appreciation for how those benefit amounts are stated, whereas the younger individuals think more in terms of lump sum value and what they do. And so the lack of appreciation for defined benefit plans with younger workers is concerning.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sir, do you have any data industry-wide that talks about basically the service fees that are typically charged by these private entities operating these defined contribution programs for various states, and how those fees would compare to, say, the operating costs of a CAPERS type of entity?
Yeah, I don't off the top of my head, but can get our hands around that data. I think it's a valid, concerning question, and we can get our hands on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. If you'd provide that for the committee, that'd be great.
Sure.
I think you have some other information that would be a comparison as to the existing cost of capers maintenance and going forward if we were to move forward on this legislation. Would you mind providing that for the committee also?
Yes, I'll pull that together more specifically in writing so that we get the numbers right on that. But what I would say more generally is that there's the notion that the current cost of north of 13%, that will come down over time because the market performance will be so good for the portfolio that suddenly the plan will become well-funded within 10 years and all these concerns will go away. And what I was attempting to work through earlier was explaining just how unrealistic that is. And so if we were to strive for the program to remain even at its current funding level, I would anticipate that the cost would only go up. And in fact, let's think about this scenario. Let's say that all of the market prognosticators are fairly right, but things are even slightly better than they say. So let's say that rather than 3 or 4 or 5% returns in the various market sectors, we get 6. 6 would be wonderful compared to what they are predicting, yet 6 pales in comparison to the 7.75% assumption. So that's actually a loss. So who has to make up that shortfall? The taxpayers do, in one way, shape, or form. Whether it's that sort of lump sum contribution, like another $1 billion here, another $1 billion there, or just a slight uptick in that 13% cost being paid. So from a general perspective, Senator Tyson, it's very clear to us that unless there's some dramatic change and turnaround in how the market's expected to behave for the next 10 years, that the cost will only go up from where it is today.
Thank you, Matthew. And also, there are, with the defined benefit plan, there are limits, and we've had employees ask for COLAs. That would not be an issue or a item that would be necessary with the defined contribution plan. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct. If you throw in an expectation of inflation, let's say a modest expectation of 2.5% of inflation over the next 10 years, if that were to occur and there's no sort of COLA with the defined benefit plan, then the actual purchasing power of that defined benefit plan amount is significantly less when somebody finally attains retirement age.
Thank you, Matthew. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none. I see a few smirks in the audience. I think it's interesting. We keep talking about capers and how capers is broken, but we don't look at actual solutions on this system. And this is changing the conversation. I appreciate your testimony, Matthew, and all your work on it. Is there anybody else that would like to testify as a proponent? Seeing none, we'll move to the opponents. Ernie Claudel with the Kansas Coalition of Public Employees.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I owe you an apology. I note here that I have addressed you in 2 different ways. My crack editorial staff missed the cut and paste mistake on the front line, so I want to thank you very much for allowing my testimony this morning. I'm actually an elected member of the Board of Trustees, and I need to do the disclaimer that I do not speak for them. I do not speak as a member of them, and I do not speak for them. My concern around this change is far and wide, and my understanding this is very scary. I hope to shed some light on some of this. First of all, in the statute that actually set up capers. It talks about preventing hardship in the future on the people. 25 of the 50 states have had great discussions over the benefit plans and pensions. One of the reasons for this is that unlike the federal government, if somebody gets to an age where they can no longer afford to make a living, it falls on the state's back. It does not fall on anybody else's. There's roughly 11%. No, it's not roughly. There's 11 actual percent of the state's population that are involved in capers. That does not count dependents. So you can make an argument that capers plan helps cover and protect not only the state but the individual to the tune of, I think you easily argue 20% of the population. Personally, my interest in capers really became heavy in 2004. I've been what I call chasing capers since that time. I actually became aware of capers in my first year of teaching in 1969 when my principal was concerned about the original teachers' retirement system. During service time and other things, in my early career was at a point in 1971 when capers was added by the legislature, added the old teachers retirement system to capers. It was not brought in it was not brought in at a funded level. According to my research, the legislature put in about $10 million for that purpose to make up the difference to fully fund it. And then 1 year at 5, and then they stopped. So combined with that, with the 25 years of underfunding is the reason that the UAL is what it is today. Incidentally, rough figures is that over those 25 years, when the actuarial required amount was not put into the system, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.3 billion was not put in. The actuary said should be put in. And this is particularly interesting and dangerous when you consider that over 50% of the trust fund comes from investment income. And one of the reasons that's low is some of the late catch-up money has never had a time to work. Normally, when you talk about a system like this, you're talking about 30 years of investment range and not about not about a shorter period of time. So my big concern, and almost borders on fear, is what is the impact on the present retirement system if you start moving money in and out? I'll get more to that in a minute. And then, of course, possibly the change is what is the outcome to the individual. So the DC programs relating to some of the previous testimony, capers cost of investing money is about 5.5%. The average nationwide for the defined contribution is 2%. So anybody that's in that kind of program automatically has lost 1.5%. The other problem comes with the DC program is actually not in the growing phase; it's in the retirement phase. Is where the problem is, and the problem becomes there is when nobody knows how long they're going to live, so they don't know exactly how much money to take out of the program. And there's statistics about how much money people have saved, and it's not the life expectancy in retirement far exceeds what most people have put away. We don't know what's going to happen to him with the employees. I included in the information that I submitted here that Capers, the comparison, the best comparison we'd have between Capers 1 and 2 and 3. You'll note there, and it's considerably less. Also, a concern of mine is that most of the peoples in the Caper retirement system don't have the extra money to put into another retirement program. Research also indicates that if people aren't forced to take part in a retirement program, many of them don't. Okay, so we have a great deal of number of population of the state that's affected by this, and it's really scary when we haven't had a chance to. There's been no chance to investigate this thoroughly. There's a real chance that that not only harm can be done with the to the retirees, but also to the system as a whole, because we don't know the outcome.
Thank you.
Okay. I thank you for allowing me to give this testimony, and I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Claudel. Committee, any questions? I would ask, Mr. Claudel, are you familiar with the Federal Thrift Savings Plan retirement system? I could tell by your testimony you were not. That is what this is modeled after, the Federal Thrift Savings Plan.
Right.
It's a retirement system that is in place, that is working, and if you talk to most, in fact, any I've ever talked to, are very happy with that system. They are not concerned about whether it's going to continue to be funded or not.
There should be concern about the total cost of this as compared to what the cost is now. And also, the UAL is from the Capers Commission, the UAL is a bona fide debt which must be taken care of.
Yes, and I will ask you one more question. Capers is based off of a pyramid system, and you've said it in your statement that continued employees coming on continue to fund the Capers plan. So when is the breaking point for that pyramid?
That's not a pyramid. All the reason that Capers is performed so well, among other reasons, is because we get a break on the investment money because there's so much of it. And when there's a possibility, we don't know, but there's a possibility that the opportunity comes about from these huge amounts of money we have, and we get a bargain. Capers gets a bargain on when they invest that money. All that money becomes held under individual accounts and cannot be used to help leverage the investment like it is now.
Thank you, Mr. Claudel. It would not be needed with the individual accounts. I appreciate your testimony and your comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jerry Henn from the United School Administration of Kansas. Welcome, Jerry. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you, Senator Tyson and committee members. I appreciate this opportunity to talk with you. I do represent United School Administrators of Kansas, and we stand in opposition to this bill, but we want to take a different take on it a little bit, and we want to understand and know why. How will this bill affect teachers? How will it? What are the models that we can actually take to our teachers, administrators, our educators in Kansas to show if this would be effective or if it would not be effective? The last I looked, there was no fiscal note to the record. Again, that's a whole nother area we don't understand. We don't know what it's going to cost. We have no idea. One of the things that we do know that the transition from Tier 2 to Tier 3 is about 20 to 25% lower for that person that retires. We know that. We don't know how people would put money into this, what would happen to their money. We would suggest that you take a year to look at this and get a good idea of what can actually happen to people's retirement funds. And so that's kind of the direction that we are at. I think one other point that I also want to make is that I've heard many times in this Capitol about why do teachers not support the legislators? And legislators have done a fabulous job of showing $250 worth of tax credit, given $250 for classroom materials, ESSER funds, paying them bonuses through ESSER funds, and that needs to be applauded and thanked. But it's that unknown of this bill that causes some of those concerns. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Ed Klump from the Kansas Association, Chief of Police.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I'm Ed Klump, and I'm here on behalf of the Kansas Association, Chiefs of Police, Kansas Sheriff's Association, Kansas Peace Officers Association, and we are standing in opposition to the bill. I want to answer the first question many of you may have, and that's why are we here? Because this doesn't affect KP&F. I get that question a lot of times when we appear in front of committees on capers, regular capers issues, and that answer is pretty easy to give. About 3 out of 4, it's actually 77% of our law enforcement agencies in the state of Kansas are under regular capers, not under KP&F. And that they represent about 1/3 of the law enforcement officers in this state. So that's several thousand law enforcement officers are represented under regular capers. And so that's why we are appearing here today. Among those, as you can see by those numbers, where you got 77% of the agencies are 30 of the officers, we're talking about small agencies. And by and large, these 1/3 of the officers are among the lowest paid officers in the state. Which brings into question one thing about a defined contribution plan is how much are they going to be able to contribute to this plan above what the minimum is. And so that's one of the concerns we have. One of the concerns we have with the regular capers plans in general, and it continues with this, is, as you know, under KP&F, one of the major benefits of that is the ability to retire a little earlier than 65 or 66 or 67 years of age. And imagine we're in a position, as well as other first responders like firefighters, a highly physically demanding job where our lives and other lives depend on how well we can respond. And some people can do that till their mid-60s and some can't. And so one of the concerns is this, is that with first responders, they may not have that number of years to invest before they have to retire and start pulling out of this. And we don't know how that affects things under this plan. To give you an example, in a Tier 2 plan, if an officer started at the age of 21 and they worked till the age of 53, they would have 32 years of service. They'd have their 85 points at the age of 53. But under Tier 3 and under this plan, you're probably going to end up working until the regular retirement age of mid-60s or maybe even upper 60s as that increases for Social Security. I heard in the earlier testimony, this is for the state's benefit, and we clearly believe that. This is shifting the entire risk from the state over to the employees. A comment was made about, in this plan, you know what they have when they retire. I'm not so sure that, it seems to me like in a defined benefit plan, you know exactly what you're going to have the rest of your life when you go into that. As long as the fund doesn't go bankrupt, you know that it's going to be there. So that is a concern for us. In this, imagine a person who looked at their portfolio last year and says, hey, I've got enough here, I can retire now. And now look at their portfolio, what it's probably going to be at the end of this year. And maybe they don't have enough now. So those are all things we are concerned with. And one of the reasons that we're taking an opposition stand to this is we have no data, no information on a scenario of what this could do to affect employees in retirement. And until we see that, it would be very difficult to support something that we don't know. Is it going to be like Tier 3 and it's going to reduce their benefits? Or is it going to be something that will improve their benefits? So, the current contribution rate is 6%. It looks to me like in this plan, it may start out at 7%. I'm not sure I understand all of that. So some of the other stuff in my testimony has already been mentioned, so I won't duplicate that. But I do want to say one thing, okay, real quickly, and I'll wrap up. One thing is defined benefit plans can work, and we got an example right here in Kansas. City of Wichita has a defined benefit plan. Way that the CAPERS has been funded or underfunded over a lot of years, and then you don't have that money to even get the returns off investment. So they can work, and I think everybody understands the condition we're in right now, but we don't believe this is the answer, at least not right now. We're not sold on it. So thank you.
Committee, any questions? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. One of the concerns that I have is about our ability to attract and retain our law enforcement officers who do such a great job for our state, for our communities. Do you have a sense of, if we move to this plan, which seems like there are just a lot of unanswered questions, how that will affect recruitment and retention of our law enforcement professionals?
Well, we are in one of the worst periods of retention and recruiting right now that we've ever faced, at least in my years of being involved in law enforcement, and that's been a lot of years now. And I think the retention is probably the bigger part, because I think new employees oftentimes aren't in that mind frame of thinking about their retirement and what this means, but certainly it is in retention. And one of the things in your public safety services is we don't have employees move around a lot. And when they do, they move from one CAPERS agency to another CAPERS agency in general. So it's not like we have people in other fields that may move out of the government employment and back in or whatever. They pretty much stay in, and they stay in for their entire career. And so I think it could have an impact, but you kind of looking in a crystal ball and trying to figure out what this does. And that's one of the concerns we have. We just don't have enough data to say for sure, and we can't support something we don't know is going to be good for our employees and our employers.
And I'm going to correct a couple of false statements. This is completely optional plan for people to convert, except for new employees. I just want to make that clear. Senator Solentrop.
I didn't mean to imply that you couldn't convert. I understand you can convert, but new employees are going to be on it. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, thanks for being here, Ed. In retention, what percentage of officers are leaving because of a retirement program that may or may not fit their needs, as opposed to everything else?
Well,
you don't have to answer that.
The everything else is probably more of an impact than the retirement system is, but the retirement system is what it is today, and it's a good retirement system. And I think there's some that question whether this is an equal retirement system or not.
Well, and the nice thing about this system, it would allow the flexibility that if they did choose to leave the state, they could roll it over into another plan. So there are some benefits. Thank you very much, Ed. Committee, we are running short on time. I do want to continue this. What I would like to do is, we're going to have to pick this up. I wanted to ask the committee, we can continue today at 11:30 after other committee meetings and continue the hearing. And what I would like to do is do that tomorrow also and complete our work for this committee for this session. Would that be acceptable to the committee? Senator Holland.
Just trying to clarify, would we continue this hearing then in tomorrow, Madam Chair, and work bills then after that? What would happen to the bill schedule for tomorrow?
We would work
just later in the day.
Yes.
Okay.
We would continue with our current schedule and just work through as we could.
Thank you.
Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this merits continued discussion. This is a concerning element of our state now and will be in the future. So I would encourage you to set a time aside to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Solontrop. Okay. Ways and Means is meeting at 10:30, so we lose the room at 10:30. That's the issue here. But I want everybody to be able to have their say and have their statement about this system. Yes, we do need to kick off the conversation, and that's what this bill does. I know that it may be the first that you're hearing of it, but it has been talked for several years, not just this year. Committee, we will do then, I will find a time to schedule either today or tomorrow to continue the hearing. So I will suspend the hearing. Unless, Sarah, you probably have a lot to say, don't you? A little? If you want to, go ahead. Sarah LaFrenz from KOS.
Yes, I'm here, but actually, I came here because Mike Scribner wasn't able to be here today for KKP, so we're also a part of that group, as well as KNEA, if that would be okay. And I won't keep you forever because I know we're gonna lose the room, like you said. Yeah. So first of all, not Mike Scribner, but really good to see you all, and thank you for having me. I'm not obviously going to be able to read my testimony to you, nor would I do that to anyone here. But you know what I would kind of step on that some of the other people have talked about, there is a lot of uncertainty. And to your comment, Madam Chair, that we have been talking about that. And that's absolutely correct. And I really appreciate you saying that to make sure everyone's clear. It's just that a lot of our members, like you heard some people talk about like recruitment and retention and the sum of everything else that's been going on, they also have some pretty big concerns about what's going on here, the fear of the unknown, if you will. And so that's kind of what we wanted to be able to come and say to you, you know, we've got some concerns here. We want to make sure that we ask these questions and make sure that, you know, like I think that the fellow who testified prior to Mr. Klump said, you know, we'd like to see a scenario with like how this would work out. And so, you know, we're here in opposition because we have those questions. And, but I really appreciate you allowing me to come up here and say just a couple of things before we ended.
No, that's wonderful. We'll try to get some scenarios for you. And what I would recommend that you do to increase your comfort zone, talk to people that are in the TSP system. Ask anybody that's a federal employee. They will tell you what they think of the system. That's what this is modeled after. And the bill also requires funding for the current CAPERS system for people that do not convert over. Okay. So it doesn't change anything for them. It just allows an option for state employees to decide whether they want to get out of CAPERS, which we've heard so many complaints about, and gives them an option to another system. That's all this bill does. I know there's a lot of fear. In fact, we definitely hit a button because somebody is advertising against this bill. I've never seen that before. Have you guys? I know. I've never seen advertisement against a bill.
I don't think so.
Before it even has a hearing. Yeah. So we'll find a time and a room and continue the hearing. We'll work with the rest of the conferees so that they're available for the hearing. If not, we'll continue at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
Okay.
So thank you, committee. Any other business to be brought before us? Seeing none, we're adjourned.